In this video, we're going to turn our attention to something called a point-in-time recovery. Now, it just so happens that when the transaction log goes about its normal business, storing modifications and then later moving them into the database when they're committed or taking them out when they're rolled back, when it's storing those modifications, it's also storing a timestamp with each data modification. And so we can use this to our advantage later on when we're restoring data out of these transaction logs, and we can perform what's called a point in time recovery. One aspect of any of these recovery operations that involve the transaction log, the database must be using the full or bulk logged recovery models. If the database is in the simple recovery model, then you can't use anything that has to do with the transaction log on a restore because there's not data in the transaction log. The simple recovery model automatically clears the transaction log from time to time, or truncates the transaction log, if you will. And so we'll have to be using full or bulk logged recovery models for this to work. Watch for scenarios on the exam where they want to try to do a point in time recovery, or they just want to apply a bunch of transaction logs, but just make sure that you notice in that question, if they ever mention that they're using the simple recovery model, they can't do this, right? Because those transactions aren't out there. Why would we ever want to perform a point in time recovery? Often out there in the real world, when an issue surfaces with the SQL Server database, the initial effects of that issue can be traced to a rather specific time period. Users will start to report on a database that has just finally stopped working, or the response time has gotten so slow that we've had to get involved here. And let's say it's around 11 o'clock that happens. Users have usually started reporting long response times, and they'll even tell us, well, I noticed that it started getting slow around about 10 o'clock this morning. What could have caused that? Well, it could be any number of things: updates, modifications to the server, installations of applications. It could be malware. Who knows what it is? Could be a mistake somebody's made. But the bottom line is we know somewhere around 10 o'clock, it started getting slow response times. We can, kind of judge that maybe something happened there. So if we just go out and restore the database and we perform a restore past that point in time, say around 10 o'clock, then we may very likely just reintroduce the same issue all over again. And we've just wasted an hour or two, however long it takes to do a restore in downtime, and we've just restored our same problem there. Or we could take advantage of that timestamp information in the transaction log and restore the database to a time just before this issue apparently started to appear, right? So how do we go about executing a point in time recovery? Well, we're just going to add the stop at function to our restore log tsql command. And we can also do this in SQL Server Management Studio. I'll show you that in just a moment. But notice with the Transact SQL environment, we could just use the restore log statement, pass the database name. Notice from disk, we put the actual backup file location on the device. We'll put a with file. This is going to be a file number. It's a backup set number. It'll be 1 or 2 or 3 based on the number of files in your backup. Then we can pass recovery or no recovery, whichever. But notice we can stop at, and we can put a date and a time, April 17th, 2017, 9:45 a.m. That means it's going to restore up to that point. There'll be nothing past 9:45 a.m. that will be restored. This gives us a point in time recovery. I've put a resource out in the working files folder called Restore a SQL Server Database to a Point in Time. You need to go play with this. It gives you step-by-step and a lot more background information on point in time recoveries. But also, let's jump out into SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to show you where this is in the graphical user interface. Notice that on the AdventureWorks 2012, I'm going to right-click, and you need to play with this. Just go in and back up your database, and then go in and do a task and restore. And so I'm going to restore the database and give it just a moment to pop up here. It says, okay, I'm going to back up the AdventureWorks 2012 database, and here's the destination. I'm going to restore it to the last backup taken on Friday, May 19th, 2017 at 4:37 p.m. Now notice I've got a transaction log here and the database, the MDB file. Notice right here is a timeline button. I can click on this and notice this says restore to the last backup taken or to a specific date and time. I can see the day that it was backed up, okay, and notice this is 5/19. Now, I know that there was one taken, I believe it was on April 21st. And so I will choose that. Let's go look around that particular week, April 27th. I've chosen the 27th and gone directly to that location. So I can see where that database is. So let me go back to my 519, and I'm just kind of letting you see the interface here. So we go back to 519, and there was a backup taken here. Notice this was a full database backup. Now, if I kind of move in to the actual hour on this, and I need to get up to 436. Let me kind of move on up here. It is saying that I have done a full database backup, a transaction log backup, and a tail log backup. I can tell it now, I don't want to go to 436. Let's back up here, and I want you to restore to about 11:36 a.m. And it says OK. Now at this point, I'm going to restore to a certain point in time, and that's how you can take care of that. I can then kick this off, and it will start the restore process, and it will restore my database to that particular point in time. And notice it was restored successfully. Okay, so lots of cool things you can do. That's a quick look at a point in time recovery.